Thank you so much for having me. This is such an honor to be able to speak with you guys tonight, especially to a group of people that are interested in international issues. It's something I'm really passionate about as well, and so this is really exciting for me. So I wanted to start by a quote that I really love and has become a guidepost for me in the last few years. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. I love this quote. It's often attributed to Winston Churchill. He didn't actually say it, and it's unclear. He actually did. And speaking of giving, I thought I would start actually with some hard data on giving and how do we give. The data that I want to show you, and this I swear is the only data slide, I'm not a big data person, is going to be about how much money people donate in the largest metropolitan areas in the United States. And I think this is really interesting. You'll notice that the highest ranking city in all of the US is Salt Lake City. They give 5.4% of their, and this is as a percentage of income. And the data is all gathered from IRS income data, income taxes. So just to highlight a few, you've got Atlanta, number 4, Houston, number 11, Baltimore, 22, Los Angeles, our brothers and sisters to the south, are 28, giving 2.8%, Chicago, New York, and down here, number 45 is San Francisco. And if you guys are like me, I love San Francisco, and I'm so proud that we are a leader in so much innovation in so many areas, in the environment, in civil rights, and social justice issues. I was really surprised by this. And you'll notice even San Jose is actually even worse, 48, and that includes much of Silicon Valley and Santa Clara County. So I was very surprised, and I thought, how did we get here? How did this happen? How is San Francisco trailing so badly in this area? And it didn't take me thinking about that very long to think about myself for a moment. I used to, in my 20s and early 30s, I probably gave about less than 0.5% of my income to charities. So I was even worse than our city's average. And how did I get here? So this is me, roaring like a lion, I will have you know, at about age 4. And as a kid, I was actually very interested in justice. I staged a big protest with my mom around this age about the fact that she was trapping gophers in the backyard, and the gophers were here first. I wanted to let her know. And she was so troubled by my vehement protest that she actually stopped catching the gophers, and we had a very messed up lawn for a long time. As a teenager, I would leave most of my allowance on my mom's desk for her to write checks to nonprofits of my choosing. But as I grew older and started learning about historical events, I often imagined that if I had been alive, during the Civil Rights era or during the Holocaust or some great humanitarian crisis, I would have definitely devoted my life to that. But I grew up in the 80s, and life was good, and we seemed to be in an era of prosperity, and things were well, and it just nothing called to me. And so I devoted my life to making art, to creating community, to living a great life in this city that I love. I love to travel, so I often went on trips, and I sometimes thought well, there are some disturbing things happening in the world, but I'm so small. I am like this tiny little person in this big, vast world, and what can I do anyways? So I might as well just, read the headlines every now and then, but not think too deeply about it. But little did I know that there were some big risk factors contributing to the fact that I was not a big giver. And some of those risk factors are, I was raised in a secular family, and the data shows that people who come from secular backgrounds, non-religious, atheist backgrounds, give far, far less than people with religious backgrounds. And that's an interesting statistic to me. And I used to think, it must just be, though, that people with religious backgrounds give only to their churches and their own religious communities, but actually that's not the case. People with religious backgrounds also give more to secular causes as well. I grew up in Santa Barbara, and I went to college at Stanford. I taught high school in Silicon Valley, and have lived most of my adult life in San Francisco. And living in wealthy enclaves is a predictor for being a low giver. If you live in a place with a lot of socioeconomic diversity, you're much more likely to be involved in giving and service. And so with my background, that was a huge risk factor. And the third risk factor, in my 20s and 30s, I was young, and young people give a lot less than older people, and that makes a lot of sense in some ways. I think there are some trends showing that's changing, especially with the millennial generation. Your socioeconomic status has something to do generally with your giving patterns as well. It tends to be U-shaped though, so that people at the lowest end of the socioeconomic status give a high percent of their income relative to those in the middle, and those at the high end give a high percentage as well. So so that could have been a factor as well. As a teacher, I was very middle income. All this changed one day when I, about 6 years ago, was on vacation in South Africa. And I got to take pictures of incredible rhinos like this one here. I went on safari with friends, and have any of you been to South Africa? How many? Can I see a few of you have been? It's incredible. You probably also went to wine country outside of Cape Town, any of you? We were having a fantastic vacation, and one of the friends we were traveling with suggested, hey, why don't we take a day and go visit a nonprofit for one day. And this was a friend who had lived in South Africa, so he had volunteered at this nonprofit for 6 months, years prior, so he had a strong connection there. And we said, yes, of course, we are adventuresome people. We would love to go visit a nonprofit for a day. So we drove up to Bapumalele, and I thought to myself, I'm not sure that this is a good idea. Toto, we are not in Santa Barbara anymore. And Bapumalele is a community center. It's in a township, and the townships in South Africa are similar to what we would consider slums in many cities. And I was just initially so overwhelmed by what becomes completely obvious being in a community like this, of all the problems. And so initially I thought, just wow, this is depressing. But I very, very quickly got over that when I got to see and experience for myself all of the programs and things that the community center was doing to overcome the challenges that they were faced with. And spending the day there and starting to understand the details and being like, oh, that's so cool, and I can see how that's working, and that's helping, and it was so exciting. And then to see how many of the locals were involved, spending their own time, devoting their own resources to improving the community, was so inspiring to me. And I remember thinking, I will no longer say as justification to myself, I don't have enough to give, I'm just one small person, what can I do anyways? Like, that script has been ixnayed out of my vocabulary. If the people in this community have time and energy and resources to give, so do I. And I remember saying really emphatically at dinner that night, my life has changed forever. And they were like, yeah, sure, Kerry. But my next step was that I decided I just really want to do more volunteering. I want to understand this world of volunteering and this world of nonprofits, and I'm so enthralled. I happened to be in grad school. I was studying art and photography, but there's a lot of flexibility in the art and photography department, so I got grants from my grad school to go teach art and photography in Haiti. On this first trip in Haiti, it was actually about 6 months after the earthquake there, and so Port-au-Prince was in a very complicated place. And the first thing that struck me is like, oh, all I can do is teach art. Like, maybe I really don't belong here. There's so many, on the hierarchy of needs, there are so many more important basic needs here in medical care, food, clean water, the list goes on and on. And yet, what I discovered is that actually the communities that I was working in, they were delighted. They were thrilled to be able to channel their creative energy and creative expression into working on art projects. I also taught photography projects, and it was incredibly rewarding work. So this is, I wanted to show you, this is the community that I lived in while I was there. It's called Carrefour, and it's a slum in Port-au-Prince, but not one of the worst slums. This is my tent right here, and you can't smell it, and that's good because there is no running water, and there is no sanitation, and there is no trash disposal in the entire neighborhood. All the trash is burned. There's no vehicle access because it's not built according to urban planning. So it's very overcrowded. It's very noisy. it was hard. I won't beat around the bush. It was very difficult living there, and but I think what it really taught me was having the experience of living in a community where those statistics start to come alive. Like, you know, half of the world's population lives on less than $2 a day. What does that mean in someone's daily life? What is $2 a day? What does that look like in terms of their access to goods and services, food, you know, basic needs? And truly, it was heartbreaking, really understanding that on a personal level. And people that I cared about and lived next to, knowing what they had access to, was really, really hard. And I would come back from my trips to Haiti, and I would often be not a great dinner party guest, because I would be so heartbroken about what I had experienced that I remember very distinctly one time I had missed my wedding anniversary with my husband on one of my trips, and so we got home and he took me out to a nice dinner and we sat down in a nice restaurant, and I burst into tears. And I was like, I can't enjoy this right now, knowing that my friends in Haiti are experiencing something so different, and I kind of can't imagine that everyone else in this restaurant can enjoy it. How are they all having fun? Do they know what's going on in Haiti? And what I realized through that experience was, wait a minute, the only reason I care is I just got home and I just experienced this for myself, and that's why it matters so much to me right now. And so the thoughts started going through my head like, well, the first thing I can change is my own behavior. And so we started, first of all, giving more. So we started giving, you know, more than the San Francisco average of 2.4%, up to 5%, up to 10%. And then I started to question, but is this individual giving, does this really matter? Like, do small contributions from individuals, does that even make a difference? Is that something that can help? So I want to show one more pie chart here, a little bit of data, just showing that of the charitable giving in the US, and of course this doesn't account for government aid, which is kind of a separate thing, but of charitable giving, 72% actually comes from individuals. Only 17% comes from corporations, and I'm sorry, 5% comes, thank you for reading the slide better than I do. I love you people. Only 5% comes from corporations and 15% from foundations. So individual giving really does matter. Now, what type of organizations does that giving go to? Very little of it, I just want to point out, only 4% goes to international causes. And that to me is a big problem because of the magnitude of problems that are happening in our world and the fact that we are the largest economy, or one of the largest economies in the world. I think that number is too small. And so I started looking at the research. Why is this? Why don't Americans care more? So of the Americans that are giving and what they are giving, why don't they care more about international issues? And what I realized is that the reason that I think Americans do care, but they mostly give to causes that feel very personal to them. And often international issues feel very far away. It doesn't feel personal. It feels really remote. And so I started thinking, how can we start to get international causes feeling more personal to people? And I thought back to my own experiences in South Africa and in Haiti, and thought, what if those types of experiences could be more available to more people? So what if more people who traveled to South Africa got to spend a day at Bapumalele? Maybe that could make a difference. So I started Give a Day Global, and our mission is to connect travelers with nonprofit organizations where they can volunteer. We focus on one-day volunteering, and I founded this organization with two of my friends who were excited about the same issues, and it's been a really interesting journey. We vet all of the nonprofits that we work with. So it's one of the really important things to us, is to make sure that when people do get connected to nonprofits, they're nonprofits that are doing work with high integrity and with good effectiveness, because that really matters. And we try to really connect the volunteering that people do with giving as well. So we think that in conjunction, that's how you can really have the most impact. There's so many places in the world, this is again South Africa, this is Cape Town, where the tourist bubble is like, even if you want to get out of the tourist bubble, you want to be adventuresome, it's very hard to find opportunities to do that. And so this is Kailisha, one of the townships, where so many of the communities where the work is being done is so far away from where the hotels are. They might be geographically close together, but they're like worlds apart. And so we want to start bridging and making connections between the nonprofit worlds and the travelers. Here are some pictures of some of the people who have volunteered. We love giving people the opportunity to really work alongside local communities. And we work in a lot of different areas in the environment, in wildlife and animals, in health and nutrition, that's mostly soup kitchens and those kinds of things. We work in education, such as after-school programs, and also economic empowerment, which is job training and microfinance and that kind of thing. And one of the things that we often like to think about is that it's not necessarily what our volunteers complete in a day, but it's what they can start in a day. It's the relationships and the ideas and the exchange of philosophies and ways of life with each other. And that can spark something that may have a very long tail to it. This is something that I put together to demonstrate that one of the philosophies that we believe in is that when everybody does a little bit, it can add up to a lot. And there's this idea of aggregating micro contributions that is something that we really believe in. And you can see that it's also happening in other arenas in our world where the aggregation of small contributions can add up to something greater than the sum of its parts. So for instance, in political campaigns, you see headlines that talk about the way Bernie Sanders and Obama in the previous elections were able to raise a lot more sums of money by really seeking out small donors in large numbers. And that's a real change from simply going for people who can give a large amount. And so that's something that we're really interested in, that idea and the way that technology can facilitate this kind of aggregation. So that's something that we believe in with Give a Day Global, because we really think that the solutions to a lot of the problems that our world is facing require that we get all hands on deck and that we get all people involved at whatever level works for them. This is one of our volunteers in the middle here. He's volunteering at a soup kitchen in Cancun. So I wanted to leave you with a couple of questions. I would love for us to talk about what giving and service means to you, what interests you in giving and service, and how you think that we can become most effective in making the changes that we want to see in the world. And also, if you are interested in volunteering, either here in San Francisco or abroad, and are interested in some of the nuts and bolts, that's something I'm familiar with, a lot of the organizations in this space, so I'm happy to talk about that a little bit if you have questions. And of course, if any of you are traveling, or if you have friends that are traveling, we invite you to consider giving a day. It may change your life. Thank you.